I want to thank you all for joining us on this beautiful Texas Independence Day. I'm Doug McDonald, the CEO of the Alamo, and we're thrilled to have you here today as we unveil some of Texas's most treasured artifacts, the newly preserved Alamo battle cannons. I want to thank several special guests who are here joining us today, including Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Commissioner George P. Bush, Senator Donna Campbell, and also the Alamo Endowment Board Chair Gene Powell, as well as other Alamo Endowment Board members. The last October, in honor of Come and Take a Day, the Alamo held a 3-day celebration of the cannons and the artillery of the Alamo. For 3 days, visitors came to see these guns and witness live demonstrations of replica cannon being loaded and fired. At the end of the 3 days, it was exceptionally clear that Texans have a special place in their hearts for these incredible artifacts. So to ensure that the Alamo's cannons are around for many generations to come, we partnered with the Texas A&M Conservation Research Lab in College Station, Texas, to perform some much needed preservation work on each of the Alamo's original 7 cannons. 2 of these cannons have now made their way back to the Alamo, along with some exciting new discoveries about their origins. To talk to us more about the preservation process and the discoveries made on these cannons is Joe Bling, the lab manager of Texas A&M Conservation Research Lab. Jim?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
There you are. Great.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It is an honor. I'm not a Texan, but I've been here since 1984. I will say that my wife is a Texan, and she should be a member of the DRT. She will be joining shortly. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been a wonderful cooperative agreement to work with the Alamo in conserving their cannon. We're a conservation lab at Texas A&M, and our role in life is to conserve artifacts from bygone eras so they last for a considerably longer period of time. Iron in its happiest state wants to rust. We have to try and slow the onset of that corrosion, preserve it so we can keep it for future generations. The 2 cannon you're going to see later, we ran through a process at the lab, we conserved them, we've coated them, and they're now ready for display, and hopefully you'll enjoy them. I'm really here today to tell you a little bit of history, the other side of the story. There are 2 cannon. One of them is the 1842 Rio Grande Cannon. And the question I pose to all of you is, why do we call it the 1842 cannon? It's not a significant date. It's in the Alamo collection, but it's not one of the Alamo cannon. In 1834, Henry Redmond, an Englishman, came to Texas in Galveston, and he was given a land grant at Zapata, which is now under the Falcon Reservoir. He built a 2-story house and store with a stone stockade, and he armed it with a 6-pounder cannon. This is the gun that he brought to Texas. It was made at the Bersham Foundry sometime between 1770 and 1790. It's got a B on the one trunnion, and the gun founder was a man by the name of John Wilkinson. Now, 1842. Why 1842? There was a raid across the border. There was a raid into San Antonio. We don't know if the cannon was involved. None of the records are accurate. In 1863, a Confederate patrol was along the border, chased by Mexican bandits. They took shelter at Zapata. They used the cannon to defend themselves. So there's a significant date for you. Not 1842. 1901, there was a flood. The cannon was lost in the river. It was recovered and later donated to the Alamo. The other cannon is a small English gun, what we call a Beauregard pattern, probably made somewhere around 1750. It's a commercial gun, it's not a military gun. A military gun are very, very robust, very heavyweight, because they're fired continuously. This is a lightweight cannon made for a small ship to defend itself against piracy. And the trunnions were knocked off, the cascabel was knocked off, the vent was spiked with a nail so you couldn't fire it. And the barrel had been filled with debris and stones wedged in the barrel. We removed the stones, and a student in the lab was cleaning the barrel out, and she looked down the barrel and said, "Jim, there's something in the back of the barrel." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And gave her a better flashlight. And she looked at me and she said, "It's a cannonball." And I said, "Well, take it out." So she took it out, and ladies and gentlemen, we have here a cannonball that came out of the one Alamo cannon. Who was the last person who handled this? We don't know. But this is a little bit of living history. And I think it brings it closer to us. In the last few months in the lab, I've had half a dozen people come through and tell me, ancestors of mine were at the Alamo. Thank you. It brings it alive. I hope this brings it alive for you. Thank you. I'll be around afterwards to answer any questions, or if there are questions now, I'll take care of them. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure, sir.
Now I'm pleased to introduce the Texas Land Commissioner, George P. Bush. As the Texas Land Commissioner, he ensures Texas veterans get the benefits they've earned, oversees investments that earn billions of dollars for public education, and manages the state lands to produce the oil and gas that makes America energy independent. Of course, we think the most important thing and the only thing he should do is oversee the Alamo. He does. He is very committed to the Alamo. He's very committed to doing the Alamo correctly. He's very committed to seeing that this preservation project that we're embarking on is done right. And he also preserves historic archives at the General Land Office that go all the way back to the Spanish Empire. We're happy to have him here again today. Commissioner Bush.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Welcome to the Alamo as we celebrate the return of these battle cannons on Texas Independence Day. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, for being here, along with Senator Campbell. Want to thank representatives from the Daughters of the Republic of Texas for joining us and caring for the Alamo over the years. There's always going to be a place of honor for you here on the grounds of the Alamo. I want to give a special thanks to the professional team at A&M to help preserve and restore these cannons. I want to thank Jim personally for the incredible work that he's done to make sure that we can appreciate the sacrifices made for liberty and freedom here in Texas. On October 2nd of last year, we launched this effort to restore the Alamo battleground, and particularly through the preservation of these cannons, which date marks the Battle of Gonzales, the first shots fired for Texas freedom, otherwise known as Come and Take It. It was the perfect date to save our battle cannons. Today is March 2nd, also one of the greatest days in Texas history. On March 1st, 1836, the immortal 32 arrived from Gonzales to reinforce the Alamo. That second day of March, the world was about to change as delegates convened in elected towns across Texas that met in Washington on the Brazos to declare independence from a tyrant. In that moment, they were not only engaged in a physical battle, but they were engaged in a consequential ideological battle for the future of the people of Texas. About 170 miles to the west, right here in San Antonio de Bejar, Texian and Tejanos faced that tyrant with the prospect of certain death. The idea of the inalienable right to life, to liberty, to pursuit of happiness discussed in Washington on the Brazos was put to the test, and in just 4 days to the sword, right here on the grounds of the Alamo. But that wasn't the end of the story, because ideas have consequences, and they have as much impact as actions as well. And the Texas Declaration of Independence matters. What 189 defenders did here matters. It made Texas free. So it's up to us to preserve liberty right here, right now, by preserving the shrine of Texas liberty for the future, because it matters. Preserving the Alamo is the most important preservation project in the entire country, because it's about preserving the artifacts that connect us to the idea of what it means to be a Texan. Preservation often leads to discovery, and in this case, it hasn't been an exception. During the work on the first 2 cannons at the lab at A&M, we discovered cannonballs inside, unfired. They may have very well been loaded by defenders who were struck down before they could fire one last volley on that terrible day of horror, but also of courage. The Alamo must be preserved, and we're going to do it together. Lieutenant Colonel William Barrett Travis wrote his stirring victory or death letter in a small headquarters on the west side of the compound, right behind where you stand. He wrote that the enemy has demanded a surrender at discretion, otherwise the garrison is to be put to the sword. And I have answered the demand with a cannon shot. So as we know, he defiantly answered with the Alamo's largest cannon, the 18-pounder, which was stationed right over there on the southwest corner. He never surrendered, and neither will we. The Alamo needs us now. All of us need to be a part of it, to save it, to preserve it, and to keep it around forever. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for helping us preserve it, and thank you for your support. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. As an important voice for conservatism and preservation both in Texas and across the nation, Lieutenant Governor Patrick is a leader in the fight for life and liberty, two important principles that we as Texans always honor, starting right here at the Alamo. He's been an important partner in our efforts to preserve and protect the Alamo, and we're thankful to have his support along with Senator Campbell. He has shown great enthusiasm for these vital cannon restoration projects while presiding over 2 legislative sessions in the Senate, which saw the state of Texas commit unprecedented funds to the work that we're doing here. And so I speak on behalf of the entire Alamo team in saying that we thank you for that work. Outside of politics, Governor Patrick is heavily involved in his community. He's raised millions of dollars for children with disabilities through his radio show, and also starting the first seminary in a Texas public prison to train long-serving inmates for the ministry. He's married to his wife Jan, a former school teacher for over 42 years. He has 2 children, Ryan and Shane, and 5 grandchildren. As a father myself of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, I know that he shares our passion to make sure that the Alamo's around for them so that they understand the true sacrifice required for liberty and for freedom. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
Commissioner, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be brief. I'm going to speak in a few moments on this great day of independence. I have to tell you that I'm just an Alamo fan. Like every schoolboy that grew up, like Phil Collins did in England when I met him. I said, "How did you become such a fan of the Alamo?" And he said, "I watched Walt Disney, just like you did. When Fess Parker was the first Davy Crockett." He said, "I watched the movie The Alamo with John Wayne for 100 times. I said, "Phil, I think I've done it 101. And over the years, I've gotten to be very acquainted with the Wayne family and the history of making the movie, and then, of course, in the true history of the Alamo. First time I came to Texas was in 1978. I was a sportscaster in those days in Washington, D.C., and our team was playing a team called the San Antonio Spurs that had a guy by the name of the Iceman. And the thing that I still have the photo of is standing in front of the mission with my cameraman back in 1978. Little did I ever dream that I would be Lieutenant Governor or have an opportunity to take part in this ceremony and the rebuilding of this sacred site. We have to remember, when the streets are closed and people are able to come here and walk the grounds of the fort, it will be a sacred place that it should be. Just as our battlefields of Gettysburg or anywhere of the Revolutionary battlegrounds are in Massachusetts, this is a sacred place where people died for liberty. We said a little earlier this morning, had it not been for this battle, the whole map of the United States would have been different for decades and probably different today. This battle changed the map and the future, and now looking back, the history of America. I'm a collector. I have 2 Travis letters in my collection that he wrote from this city when he was an attorney before he took over the Alamo. And I think I have a cannonball that was here in the battle. I bought it, at least they told me it was. They gave me all the provenance, so we're checking all that out. That's what I said to our Texas A&M professor. I'm going to check out my cannonball, but I'm a big collector of Alamo memorabilia, and I'm just honored and privileged to be Lieutenant Governor and be standing here today. So, Commissioner, thank you. I want to thank the private sector who has stepped up in San Antonio and all around the state to rebuild this incredible site. And the state has put in an unprecedented $100 million since I've become Lieutenant Governor. We put $25 million in my first session, 2015, $75 million in a tight budget. But when the session started, and Senator Campbell, your senator, knew this, I said there are 2 priorities in the tight budget. One is, which was very important to us, to be sure we had $25 million to provide vests that could sustain a high rifle round for all of our brave law enforcement officers across the state. And the second was $75 million as the next step towards making sure this becomes a reality. And in a tight budget year, that passed, and that funding was provided. But it's going to take a lot more of the private sector, local government. We're all going to have to step up together so that for generations, school children and their parents and their grandparents can come here and see it as it was. See it as it was. Not just drive by it, but see it as it was with all of its dignity and the integrity of the battle site. Thank you all very much. God bless. We're going to unveil the cannons, I think.